Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to Sports Talk 920. I am your host, Michael Goodman, and today you have one very confused Packer fan here after the Packers' 47-25 loss to the Tennessee Titans. Don't know if I should hit quite panic mode yet, but I'm pretty close to being there, and I'm maybe just very torn in what I want to see happen with this franchise moving forward. This basically, going into this season, I think a lot of people, the way people predicted the season to go, that the Packers were going to be one of the NFC favorites, kind of get back on track to where they were back in 2014, and this year was going to be basically a no-excuse type season for the Green Bay Packers, and a team that ended up almost as per usual, just getting decimated with injuries, almost opening the door for more excuses. And I don't know what to say, who to put the blame on. You know, there was parts during that game I was saying we got to get rid of Mike McCarthy. We got to get rid of Ted Thompson. You know, we got to get rid of Dom Capers, which I think if you get rid of Mike McCarthy, I think you maybe wipe the slate clean and start with a new coaching staff. But you're still also starting anew. And, you know, it's a place where I'm torn because you think about the Minnesota Vikings, they lost their fourth straight game. They're almost in just as bad a shape as the Green Bay Packers are. So I don't know if I can, count this season out. And nothing is going to happen, I don't think. There was at points in the game I'm like, fire Mike McCarthy before they get home. Before they make that trip back to Green Bay. Because that was the most pathetic effort and energy I seen going into that game. And I kind of knew that they might have been in trouble when they were talking that McCarthy didn't see any issues with that team's energy in the game versus the Colts. And they come out and they're flatter than they were the week before. And I heard some excuses on McCarthy, with the injuries, and the defense is playing horrible too. So maybe, it's a thing. Capers is probably going to be gone too. And the offensive game plan didn't really get to go into effect because of how bad the defense played. But the first two drives, and a lot of it was on Aaron Rodgers, those first two drives, he was just missing some what I think would almost be for any NFL quarterback, easy passes to hit. Not even just for Aaron Rodgers. I mean, any NFL quarterback should have been able to hit those. But then, it's just kind of been how the offense has been. I mean, why are these receivers not been getting open all year? I was the one that came on here and said McCarthy deserves a chance to redeem himself and bounce back from the terrible offense that they had last year. And I will say that it's a terrible cop-out excuse to say this play calling is predictable. Because unless you're pulling some of the stunts that the Tennessee Titans did pull out today, like the halfback pass, some few other plays, maybe the onside kick, most of the plays are going to be somewhat predictable. I predicted exactly what happened in the Patriots game today. One of the greatest coaches of all time and the greatest quarterback of all time, Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, knew they were going to sneak it up the middle, albeit it didn't work out for them. But a lot of times you can have an idea what these people are going to do. And I've talked about that. You're not going to know what exact routes they're going to run. But the lack of separation that most of these receivers have been getting, I mean, Jordy Nelson, he hasn't been getting the separation, but he has the hands. Davante Adams is probably the only receiver on the team that's getting some sort of separation on their man. I don't know if we just automatically blame coaching on this one or what have you. And maybe the refusal to kind of make work with what's happening. And I'll say, McCarthy used that excuse too, which is to me just as pathetic as what fans say when they say the play calling's predictable, and they say, well, it's not because it's not the game plan, it's the team not executing, and that's just as lame as an excuse. If you can't get these players to execute on a week in, week out basis, you got to change something. You maybe got to simplify the offense. I don't know what it is, but even more so, I think maybe switch that case over to the defense, because you know how injured this team is especially on defense, that you would hope that maybe that they would simplify this defense. It might be a little complicated. Some of the especially with the round table or the round robin, or whatever you want to call it, of cornerbacks in the secondary or secondary defensive backs. The communication seems to be lost. They're not getting the pressure they used to. Clay Matthews hasn't been able to stay healthy, and it's I know over the past few years he's been a little bit better than he has been in the past at staying healthy, but it seems like once he gets these little tweaks in his hamstring, what they make sound like tweaks end up being multiple week injuries, almost similar to Sam Shields' concussions, where, maybe he'll be out a week and all of a sudden, well, what the hell, we're going to put him on IR because the concussion's that bad. And you got to wonder what the hell's going on here. And it's hard to say, and maybe it's a Ted Thompson thing too, not putting the correct depth, and maybe McCarthy these past few years since that Super Bowl run, or maybe even during that Super Bowl run, put the wool over everyone's eyes, and basically was coaching a team that wasn't as good as everyone thought. He just coached them up to be that good. Rudy always said the one thing he will say nice about Mike McCarthy, and because I still say Mike McCarthy's a good coach, is that he never got blown out of games. I think barring maybe his first year. There's a few exceptions to that rule, but for the most part, never really got blown out of games. These past 2 weeks, even past this season, Cowboys basically got blown out. They kind of scored a few garbage touchdown points to make it close at the end. So I don't know if it's coaching, depth. I think I said this last week where maybe we need to see Ted Thompson pull almost like a Doug Melvin move and step aside, maybe have some role in the front office, because I think he's still, as a scout, I think he's still good. But I think Ted Thompson's getting into that point where he keeps building for tomorrow, but today's never going to come. He's maybe setting this up for Elliott Wolf to come in and just win a few Super Bowls here, rattle him off. I don't know. He made some good moves, when he first got in. Had the maybe not fun decision, or maybe it wasn't totally his to dump Favre and get rid of Favre and start Aaron Rodgers. It was a tough call. It ended up being a good move for the franchise. And he's made some good draft picks. He's built a competitive team through basically solely the draft. But, they're not bringing in depth. And even like Rudy said, I think one of maybe the big differences is that back in 2010 when this team got hurt, I think it was Rudy who said this. I was talking to a lot of people about the Packers today and what this performance meant. But back in 2010 when I think this was actually Dan, sorry. Back in 2010 when they had all those injuries, they basically signed some street free agents to fill some of the roster spots that have holes. You got to think at this point there's some corner out there. Maybe it's was it Antonio Cromartie who got cut by the Colts. Maybe he's a better option. He hasn't been playing well all year, but maybe he's a better option than that Bryce. Even though he's a rookie, he's younger. Is he really going to be a part of the future of this team? Gunter, maybe. Goodson, he's already in his upper 20s, and he really hasn't made a huge impact. He's a little bit better than nothing on the field, but you got to wonder if you can find something better on the street. I don't know. We'll see. But, it's going to be a tough task for this Packers team. I thought maybe I'm going to say they're pretty close on teetering to a bad end and going off the deep end. This is a team now I think we could officially say this could be a team that could easily miss the playoffs. If the season, they always say if the season ended today, the Packers would be out of the playoffs. They would not be in. So you got to be careful. And I think, Dan said, if the season ended right now at a 4-5 record, there would be some change. I agree with Dan. And he said it might not be as big as some fans would like. But if it keeps going down the road that we're maybe seeing this team go, maybe changes are going to be bigger than what we think. Because you got to realize, too, realistically, maybe you have more. And I think Rudy said this to me today. You probably have 4 more years of Aaron Rodgers. That's probably what you're realistically looking at. Basically, I think that about runs to the end of his contract in 2020, after the 2020 season. It'll be about 15, 16 years, maybe a few more, but hell, he keeps taking these hits. So you got to win now. You have that franchise quarterback. You know what you have in Aaron Rodgers. He's still a good quarterback. And the only, I guess, advice or only thing I will say, and I will basically talk out of both sides out of my mouth on this subject, because I'm not qualified to make coaching decisions. I can offer my opinion, I can offer my concerns for what moves could be made, but that's basically about it. Because Elliott Wolf I think we basically all know is going to be the future GM of this team when Ted Thompson either A, decides to hang him up, or B, that the Packers decide to fire Ted Thompson. It's inevitable that Elliott Wolf will be the next GM one way or the other. Now, if you want to go into 2017 with a new GM and a new head coach, I think you got to be smart about what you do. Not every new head coach is going to be better. And starting with a new coaching staff, is it going to be? Is there going to be a rift between Aaron Rodgers? How bad is that rift between Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy? Is that going to be a problem? Can that be fixed? There are a lot of factors that play into this that it's not as easy as just dropping the coach and bringing a new one in. Maybe Mike McCarthy and Mike McCarthy and Aaron Rodgers are just both frustrated because they're not getting what they want to get in on that team together, or maybe there's a little bit of a difference in opinion on maybe some of the players and packages that they run. Maybe something that can work out, especially if you get a guy like maybe Elliott Wolf that will kind of combine a little free agency, a little bit of draft help. And I think Rudy did get it probably a little bit more right. I do like a guy that can build through the draft. And I think Ted Thompson has done a pretty good job of doing so. But, you look at the Seahawks and the Chiefs and the Raiders, teams that have, Ted Thompson disciples, running those teams and what they're doing. They're doing a lot of stuff through the draft, yes. But they're also filling some of these holes with some veteran free agents, and not always blockbuster trades. I know the Raiders, signing Bruce Irvin, someone like that, a little bit bigger of a name. But other than that, a lot of times you just see just little veteran help. The secondary, you probably, I don't know who was out there, and I think we talked about the middle linebacker position. You had Jake Ryan and Blake Martinez doing a pretty good job covering the middle there, but at some point, either people get injured. Jake Ryan did get hurt today, or there's going to be just some inexperience with those middle linebackers that maybe you want to bring someone with veteran leadership in. And I think too, you had Julius Peppers, who was a good free agent signing a few years ago, and I think again when Thompson does pull that trigger, he makes some pretty smart moves, but he's just afraid to pull that trigger. And now I guess Julius Peppers